everybody.
Hello.
How are you, Trent?
I'm good. How are you doing, Amar?
I'm doing good. So, okay, I'll basically welcome everybody first and kind of give you the rundown of what we're doing today. So basically, my name is Amara, and I am here with the lovely Trent, who is our samples expert. So today our listen and learn session is going to be focusing on effective samples management, and I am going to have the pleasure to grill Trent today.
Can't wait.
Okay, so how this session is going to work, it is a little bit different from the other ones that you've seen today. Basically, if you've ever heard of the game 20 questions, it's similar to that. So we've modeled it the same. So basically, I've collected your burning samples questions from the audience, and I'm going to be grilling Trent with those, and he has about 60 seconds to answer each question. Now, if you know anything about Trent, he is a little bit of a talker. So this might seem easy for most, but for Trent, this might be a little bit difficult.
Not easy for me, I'll tell you that.
That's okay. But
I'll do my best.
If you do the task in time and we have some leftover time for some questions, then we will take some from the audience. So just make sure you guys want to send them through the Q&A box, then you are more than welcome. All right, Trent, should we get into it?
Let's go. I'm ready.
Perfect. So the first question is actually from me. So I wanted to start it out simple and give a little intro into samples. So basically, my first question is, what is samples management and why is it important?
Yeah, so I mean, samples are so key to a business launching their collection. It's key to brand affinity. It's key as well to like getting your to driving sales and getting your actual products to the consumer. So whether it's being used in a photo studio, going through design iterations, if it's used for PR and marketing purposes, samples are super important to the health of a business and the successful launch of a collection. I think anyone in the industry knows how important that this part is. So yeah.
All right, I think that was about 60 seconds. Okay,
Yeah.
So next question is, in 10 words, what is the Launchmetrics samples tool?
Okay, you said 60 seconds, not 10 words.
No, but now we've changed it up.
I'll go over. Okay, let's see. Well, let me do this. Okay, so, okay, so I would say like samples tool allows teams to effectively manage samples across departments while maximizing their opportunities and for production.
Okay, so
I think you should have at least give me 20.
No, but you got the 60 seconds for sure, but I think we maybe had like 18, but it's okay.
Wow, that's hard.
Okay, next question is, how does samples differ from other sample management tools that are already on the market?
That's a tough one because, to be honest, obviously I work at Launchmetrics, so I'm going to be a little biased here, but the reality is there are other tools in the market, but the functionality is usually very, very limited. Most of them, if there are some out there, they're very localized. One of the best things with us is samples are used all across the globe. A lot of companies have regional offices everywhere. It's super important to have all the functionality needed and have global and local support as well. So to me, there's not really a comparison. If they're not using us, they're typically not tracking samples effectively.
Yep. So Launchmetrics really does it all, eh?
Yes.
Okay. Can samples help me in my sample loan and return process?
Absolutely. In fact, this is one of the main functionalities of samples because you try to give everybody visibility, and it doesn't matter if someone's borrowing a sample internally or if someone's borrowing it externally. Tracking those loans and knowing exactly when a sample is coming back to you from another team or from a stylist is one of the core functionalities of the system. So yes.
All right. Nobody likes anything messy, so keeps it all together.
Usually before they use us.
Okay. Is there a way to determine the current location of my samples with the samples tool?
Yes, and kind of in a couple different ways, actually. So the great thing is, like I said, you can like search for a sample by a style number, et cetera, and know exactly like who has it or how long they're keeping it for. But on top of that, some of our brands and clients are using RFID technology. So how it works, let's say I have like a huge warehouse of samples that I need to always go and pull from. and I have no idea where I put it. We do have something in place to be able to put location, but let's say I don't really know where it's, someone mistake it, someone slipped it under their desk, who knows? You can actually put it into the mobile app that you use, and it acts as almost like a metal detector. You know, those interesting people you see when you go to the beach. It's kind of like that, and it allows you to actually track the actual samples. So it's actually a pretty cool update that we've had in the last couple of years. So yes.
High tech. Yeah. All right. Can samples help me to finally keep track of all of my socks after laundry day?
Well, this is a first. I mean, sure. Interesting question. I don't know if that would be the main use case, but I guess if that's how you're trying to track things, I think that's maybe a personal problem, but who knows?
I'm just sick of the mix and match socks trend.
That is annoying. I'll give you that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what about my glasses when I take them off?
Actually, I'm glad you brought up eyewear, because a lot of eyewear brands do use this for tracking samples. So obviously it's a little bit different than apparel, but not as far as the use case goes. So if you want to track your glasses, you can do it. We actually have like these little tiny barcodes that you can actually put on the frames of the glasses to track them. So the answer is yes. Again, I don't know if you want to use it for that specifically, but feel free.
Well, Trent, I'm always leaving them on my head. So, so okay. Aside from apparel and accessories, can I track anything else?
Yeah, so actually outside of eyewear, under the fashion, beauty, luxury umbrella, there are so many other ways to track samples. So we have a couple of agencies that are using it to track their electronics. They actually track their mobile phones. They're used in a very similar way to apparel or jewelry. We also work with home goods. So if you want to track furniture and couches as they're going through that photo studio process, or they're being used for a visual merch team and how the stores will be set up for home goods stores. Absolutely. It really is the same use case. It doesn't really matter. And our system's really good about being flexible to that.
Wow. Is there anything we don't track? That's not a question. That was just mine.
I mean, that's tricky. If it comes to anything that's going on to an e-com site, pretty much we can track it. So yes.
Great.
Or no.
Okay. Can I track the history and details of each individual sample?
Yes. So that actually is something that's really nice. There's a running log always. So if you want to know a couple of different things, let's say a sample has been with your team for 6 months, but then you end up gifting it to an editor, an influencer. It will leave the system, but you'll always be able to see everywhere it went internally, everywhere it went, or at some point, let's say the sample goes missing. It's great because you can go back in the log and see okay, who had the sample last? And let's figure out, well, that's a good starting point to locating where it actually went and where the sample is. So wow. Yes.
Yeah, so all the steps.
Okay.
Yeah. How does the samples tool help with managing the logistics and shipping of samples?
Yeah, so also good question. So samples orders are placed. Many of our clients, they have vendors and manufacturers all over the world. Sometimes people have 50 different factories that are producing samples for them. So what's great is the factories can even be on board. So when the samples orders are actually placed, they don't necessarily get placed in our system, but information from the system they're placing in goes into our system. And so they can see at what point the samples are actually arriving from the vendors. So it really helps from anyone that's in receiving or in a warehouse or for a samples team. It's really great at being able to streamline that whole process.
Honestly, I just picture myself wrapped up in a blanket, looking out the window, checking every 5 seconds if my Amazon order is coming that I just placed.
I mean, I guess it could be similar to that, but yeah, it does really help from the beginning of the samples life cycle, which is great.
Yeah. Okay, so we're halfway through. Do you feel the pressure? Are you feeling okay?
I feel the pressure, but I feel like I'm getting the 60 seconds thing down. So we'll see if I can hold
break.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, cool. Next one. Can samples be used to manage samples for events such as fashion shows, product launches?
Yeah, In fact, I mean, there's so many samples use cases, especially when it comes, again, it's used by a photo studio, it's used by a design team, it's used internally. But when it comes to like a PR purposes or marketing purposes, absolutely. So if your brands want to know what samples are going to the runway for their show or for like a presentation, for instance, or maybe they have like a big trunk show that they're sending samples to in different cities, around the world, and they want to know exactly what is being put on display for those. So any type of use case, this is used as a planning resource for that specifically.
Love a use case. Okay. Can I determine the ROI of each sample loan?
Yeah, so actually what's kind of cool about this is not to go into it on the other side, but we have another product that tracks all the mentions that you get from the samples. And that's the whole point of the sample. So what's great is you'll be able to see, and we're having some updates coming into our samples products later, that you'll be able to tie back the samples you're sending with the actual placements that you're receiving and the media impact value that placement actually had. So it's great. So like if you're in a PR team and you are constantly getting requests from a publication and you're always sending them samples and making them a priority, but they're actually never using your samples, you're going to start to see that kind of data pull through and be a little more strategic about the relationships you try to work with more, or maybe there's a hard conversation that needs to be had. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay. Launchmetrics is built around data. We know this. Is that also applicable when it comes to the samples tool?
A good question, because I think what's interesting about that, I think maybe people would assume probably not, because they're thinking about it more from like a logistics standpoint, but really data should be used to be strategic with samples as well. So what's great is like brands, if let's say, I can like run a report, I can see that in overall no matter the use case of the department, I can see how many samples that I've created over a collection, a season, over a given year. And let's say I created, 9,000 samples, but then I go and look and only, 4,500 of those samples were actually used. You can use that specific data along with to see what the most popular styles were during those time periods to cut back on sample production. So absolutely using data is very important actually aspect of samples. And that's something we really work on like teaching our clients, because it really affects your ROI.
Yeah, definitely saving time and money.
Yeah.
Okay. Can samples help with managing budgets for sample production and distribution, or help with planning and forecasting?
Yes, and actually, I guess that kind of bleeds into like the question we just talked about, because if you're looking at this data and you're planning, also part of it too is a lot of teams will just all order their own samples. And then they don't realize, wait a minute, the photo studio samples can also be used for PR down the road, or maybe PR gets them first. There's ways that teams can effectively share. So from a planning standpoint, you're absolutely using this data to make sure, again, you're not overproducing, but also kind of find that fine line, because you don't want to miss out on sample opportunities or PR opportunities as well.
Definitely. Well, I've never been much of a planner, so thankfully samples can help with that. Okay, next question is, can samples help me prevent family theft of my favorite Prada shoes?
Also, interesting question. I can't say I've asked about family theft, but we actually, unfortunately, and I think this maybe used to happen more long ago, but one of the things that some brands will come to us about is like sample accountability, just in general. I think, samples was such a free for all before, and people could just internally take samples. And at the end of the day, there's some brands have, loss prevention teams. And this can, again, with our logs and even with RFID tracking and stuff, this can help prevent that. Hopefully that's not happening at your company, but there's always that outlier. So I think it can definitely help with that, and just hope it doesn't need to go there.
Yeah, beware, sister. Okay, so next question is, how could the samples tool benefit the finance team?
Yeah, I mean, going back again to like the data perspective, I could think a couple different ways. One is if the sample planning and the data is being used season to season to see how much of samples are actually being used, what's interesting is before brands come on, usually there's zero accountability. And they have no idea what actually goes used. They just know they made all these samples and they spent X amount of dollars on it. Finance can then go in and look and say, you know what, let's cut back on sample production. That immediately, samples is a huge cost to the business. The quality of the samples is high, you know, et cetera. So I think for that, also when samples like go missing or like write-offs, I think one is like you can cut back on sample loss. There's a lot of sample loss because people just don't know where things are because they're not using any type of system other than like Excel or a Google Doc. So for finance, they're also using that to see how much can we cut back on sample loss. And then for tax purposes, they can also run a report, see all your like damaged samples or like lost samples as write-offs throughout the year and use that for tax purposes.
Well, I mean, it definitely would save money. So yeah, I wish it could do my taxes too.
Yeah.
I understand how sample tracking would be used for brands and agencies, but does it make sense for a retailer to use the samples tool?
That's hard because not always, but it does sometimes. So like we do work with retailers and e-tailers that have samples. I think part of it is if some retailers have, you know, other brands, of course, but some of them make their own products. In that case, samples are absolutely effective. But also in the case, if they are tracking other brands' samples and they're getting sent samples, if they're holding on to those samples for any time period or given period, then a lot of times it does make sense for them to track them, because if they're bringing on, like doing their own PR with other brand samples and they're doing their own photo shoots internally for their retailer or e-tailer site, then yes, it can definitely be a use case. But if they're not doing any of that, then not always.
Okay, so it depends.
Yeah, it depends, really.
So I prefer having everything in one place. Since we place our samples orders in another system, does your tool allow for integrations?
Yeah, so I kind of touched earlier about like how you wouldn't use our platform to place your sample orders, but
Right.
and usually a brand has a system that they're doing that in, like a PLM or ERP, something like that. The great part about our system, it's really meant to be an extension of where all your other samples data live. So again, if you're placing that samples order in another system, we have API or an FTP integration. In fact, we have integration specialists in-house that their job is to really work with brands on this. So this is a very seamless process, and the information can go automatically into our system. And it's very easy and straightforward once this integration is set up.
Okay, perfect. Next question is, my team is used to doing things their own way. How do I get the senior staff to be on board with implementing a new tool like samples?
Ooh, you had to go there.
Hard.
This would definitely, I'm not, you know, I'll be transparent. I'm not, could be the trickiest part, you know, of bringing on a samples tool. The reality is before people are using us, and I kind of hinted at this at the beginning, that there's not many other tools out there like what we offer. The reality is people have been doing it their way for years and years and years and years, and just kind of, you know, they don't want to learn a new process. It's really hard to change behavior. But at the end of the day, if you're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a lot of times I will say this is mandated by finance, but also the teams will say once they start using it, they realize, oh, wait, this is so much better. I'm not emailing 15 different people internally asking for a sample when I need it today for a shoot. So I think, yes, it can be initially annoying for these brands, but the great part is we've been doing this and installing sample solutions at huge brands, small brands, agencies, all over the place globally for about 15 years. So like what we bring to the table is that consultation approach of how to get these teams bought in to use the product. And like I said, it's super successful. Once they start using it, they realize how easy it is. And it's just a mobile app. So all you're doing is scanning something from a camera. So it's not like you're adding much work, but people are adverse to change. That's the nature of humans.
Yeah.
But we're there to like push you. And I mean, actually push you. So.
But I guess too, it's like that sense of confidence, you know, like we've been doing this for a long time, and obviously it's hard, but sometimes it's
yeah, it needs a little extra push. And a lot of times too, management actually should be the one that's bought into it, because they're usually the one signing off on this. I would say the problem could be others within the business. But again, once they start using, everyone's actually usually like really, really happy with the new system, unless they're the ones stealing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we went over 60 seconds for that one, so we're
Okay, give me that as one. That's
not like
one.
I have a timer or anything.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
okay, next one is, can I place sample requests internally?
Yes. So actually, when we do this whole rollout of samples across the business, a lot of times we do it in different phases, but the ultimate end goal and what we see works, what works the best is when you have a centralized system. A lot of times, like if samples are placed in one central location and you have like a library manager, samples like a gatekeeper, then internally we have a full requesting system that allows teams internally to go place requests, tell them what they need it for. It will filter in, they'll get a notification to that sample coordinator or the library manager, and then they can approve or deny the request. So there's a full workflow in place, and it will notify that person, hey, that got approved, you'll be receiving that sample, or we will send it to the external source, or you'll get it today, et cetera. So that's really the ultimate goal, and where we see people, brands using their samples the most effectively.
Yeah, like a seamless communication for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. So I think we're doing good for time here. So I might have to give you a couple bonus, but we'll get to this one first. So lastly, can samples help me organize my closet and track when I last wore that pink shirt so I don't wear it to a client call?
I mean, that pink shirt thing sounds like that's on you. It's a personal choice.
I think they're all
As far as a closet, I mean, a samples closet at a brand is not really any different than a samples closet at your, a closet of your actual clothes at home. In fact, we have actually tracked, I mean, I'm not going to say who, of course, but we've actually tracked like celebrity inventories before, so their stylists can easily pull samples for them. That's something we've done actually for years. So the answer, yeah, you absolutely can. Do you want to put your budget towards that?
No, I was going to say on Wednesdays we wear pink.
Yeah. Okay. Well, perfect.
All right. So yeah, like I said, we were doing good for time. So I did put together a couple bonus questions because I was like, maybe you will be able to get this done, which you did. So here come the 3 bonus. Okay.
Okay.
What were brands doing before using the samples tool?
Running around like crazy people with like chickens with their heads cut off. I mean, that is real. I've been in so many meetings of understanding how brands were like using samples before. And honestly, it's endless communication. They're using Excels, they can't find anything. Their sample loss is usually pretty high. Again, I think it's just from a day-to-day standpoint alone for like the individual people working with samples was a little bit of a nightmare. You're missing your photo studio deadlines. You're not getting your products up fast. So I think it's like a little bit of a nightmare. But at the end of the day, people are like, ugh, but I don't want to be the one to like try to figure out how to clean this up. But once people know about us, then that's where we come in.
Yeah, for sure. Next one. What would brands do without the samples tool?
I mean, continue operating inefficiently. Probably somewhere like crying in a closet, hoping it goes away. But I mean, honestly, I think it's a daily frustration. That's just it's a reality for a lot of brands. I mean, I'm not saying every single brand isn't, but if they're doing this manually, there's usually a lot of pain points along the way. So
yeah, no more headaches.
yeah.
Any reason to not have a sample solution in place?
No. I mean, there's no, unless you're the retailer that's not shooting samples for, for the brands that you are tracking or that you're selling, maybe that, but otherwise, again, it doesn't matter if it's like a small company or a small brand or a small agency or a large one or a global brand, or you have your mass market or jewelry. I mean, it doesn't matter. Across the board, the samples use case really is pretty much the same for tracking.
All right. Thank you, Trent. And okay, so now I'm just going to see, we got a couple audience questions. So before we wrap up, I will send a couple of those over for us too. Okay. Here we go. Can I see the live location of my samples in the warehouse?
Yes. So actually, good question. So like I said, you can do that like weird metal detector situation. But on top of that, we also have a really cool like warehouse tool, like piece in place. It's like you basically you barcode your shelves of the location. So it's cool because I can come in, take my mobile device, I can scan that the shelf or the rack, and then I can scan the sample and it will match exactly to where that is. So I can then go online and look and be like, okay, it's in the warehouse, it's on shelf 42, rack 30, you know, whatever the case is, and see that exactly where it's at. So it's actually pretty cool. And again, very
Really
easy.
specific, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next one is, does the tool send reminders to the stylist when samples are overdue?
Yes and no. It doesn't do it automatically. And this is partially because clients don't really want to be like annoy the stylists or editors or influencers, whoever has their like samples externally. But what is good is if they'll get a notification internally once the sample's overdue, and through the system, you can quickly shoot a reminder if you want to send it to that person to say, hey, you can keep this another week. We really need that sample back. And it will come from the email address associated with that user. So it looks like it's actually coming from them. It's not like through the, but you do it right in the system directly. So it's not automated, and there's a reason for that, but you can do it.
You can be like inconspicuously annoying.
Exactly. Exactly.
Last question we have here is, does the tool let external people request samples?
Also, yes and no. So what we do is we have a product called galleries that you can send out like all your digital images. So when you don't need like the physical sample, but also what it does is it allows you to like put it out not only to the audience that we've built globally of members, but also to your own private mailing list. And what's cool is you can enable in the back end, like they can go through, put in their information, what they need it for, how long they need it, and that sample request externally will filter into samples. And then just like the internal sample request, you're able to approve or deny it. But it also like streamlines that whole process. So yes, but it's with another system that goes hand in hand with samples that we offer called galleries.
Yeah, I guess so. To like wrap everything up, we
Yeah.
need samples, everyone. No, but it definitely would be beneficial and alleviate a lot of headaches.
Yeah,
So
I'm telling you. All
thanks for
right.
letting me grill you today with all these questions. You did awesome. You were under the time too. So
I did it.
You surprised us all.
I'm shocked myself, to be honest.
I
All
know.
right.
Okay, Trent. Well, we will talk soon, and thank you guys
Okay.
for listening.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.